Wonderful. Now, the gold rush only lasted 2 years. Very quick, wham bam, thank you ma'am. It was 1897 and 1898, and everyone came through Skagway. They had to. Now, imagine that you are in Seattle, Washington on July 17th, 1897, and you saw and heard a beautiful steamship come up to the docks. That steamship was coming from Skagway, Alaska, and rumor was it was full of gold. Well, everyone in town got very excited about that idea. It took about 24 hours before they unloaded the hull. Everyone in Seattle was down on the docks to see what everyone had been talking about, and the rumors were true. 4,000 pounds of gold was taking off of that ship into Seattle. Well, that electrified the whole West Coast and ultimately the whole nation. Everyone had gold fever suddenly. Now, in that era, in the Victorian era in America, it was a really rough time. It was a lot of disease, a lot of poverty. Everybody was broke. So the idea of gold was quite exciting, and especially for women. Women in Victorian America did not have it so great. It was very hard for them to live any kind of independent lifestyle. But if they headed up north to Alaska looking for their gold, they might have a more independent way of living. So 100,000 people were enticed to get on the next ship and come up here to find their fortune. Of that 100,000 people, they all had to come through Skagway to get up into the gold fields in Canada. Of that 100,000 people, 60,000 of them turned back. And you'll see why when I explain the journey. Of that 40,000 that actually made it to Dawson City, only 4,000 found any gold. And of that 4,000, only 20 found enough gold to call themselves rich. And of that 20, only 10 of those people left Alaska with more money than they came. So it was quite the risky lottery. But again, it wasn't just the riches, it was also the adventure. And I'm going to focus mostly on the women's adventures today. We're going to start by talking about this building. This is the McCabe building. It was one of the first solid structures built here. Skagway initially was just a tent town full of a whole bunch of miners. It was, we were standing on native Tlingit land. It was their traditional hunting and ceremonial grounds. When Captain Moore came up here and smelled gold somewhere, and he decided to cut down all the trees and build himself a town. Well, it turned into a swampy mud pile, and it was a whole bunch of tents and a whole bunch of men. But that gold had so many people coming through here, they built a town almost overnight. And this is the first big structure that they put in. It was the Methodist Church that built this, and they made it as an institution of higher learning. So a little college for the boys and girls. Because the gold rush was in and out, we didn't really need a college after the gold rush was gone. So they sold it to the city. It became the jail downstairs and the courthouse upstairs. So we know that many of these working girls that I'm going to be talking to you about, these prostitutes, spent a lot of time before and quite literally below the judge in this building. In the 60s, they sold it, it turned into our city hall. It's a very beautiful building. If you are here this afternoon and you're interested, it's $2 to tour the museum inside. You can learn all about Skagway's history. Currently, our mayor sits up in that office behind the star window we can see on our way out. Now we're going to go back out into the sun, and I'm going to teach you something. Today you are going to be streetwalkers. We're mostly going to be talking about girls, the good time girls specifically, and they were streetwalkers. I want to teach you all how to be professionals. We're going to start as streetwalkers. We'll make our way up to crib girls, and then ultimately my goal is to make you all into brothel boys and girls by the end of it, okay? But we have to start somewhere, and that is the streetwalking. Come this way. While Skagway does look like a little Disneyland town, if you want to, but I want some style, okay? So we're gonna step off. She says, oh, I don't know if I can do this. I know you can, honey. All right, I want you to step off into the street and look all the way to the right. Stick it out. Come on now. Come on. All the way to the left. And now let's shimmy across the street. What do you say?
Where's the shimmy, sweetie?
Yes.
I'll do just the shoulders.
Okay, yes, girl. What's your name? You can tell me. What is it? Oh, hey, dear. You'll be a professional by the end.
I thought your name was Lola.
Lola. Welcome to. Now, those 100,000 people, I'm gonna pretend like you're gonna pretend like you are one of those, okay? You are a gold thirsty person that wants to get on the boat and come up here to Skagway and try your luck. Now, you know that you have to bring 2,000 pounds with you, 2,000 pounds of supplies, each of you, because the Canadian government has required it. They want to make sure there's not a bunch of wild Americans running around out in the wilderness and running out of food or running out of supplies. So you have a very specific list of supplies that you have to bring with you before you're allowed over the border. It's almost like a backpack the size of an elephant. But you're not worried about it because all you have to do is get it on the boat. Once you get to Skagway, you can get yourself a cart with some horses and they'll just haul it right over the hill for you, right? So you gather all of your things, your bacon, your beans, your flour, your boots, all of those things. You put them on the boat. Now the boats to get from Seattle to Skagway in 1897 wasn't quite as luxurious as the boats that we're on today, right? And it took quite a bit longer. So a few weeks, you get to Skagway and you're so excited, you're gonna get in the town, you're gonna get yourself a wagon. You arrive and realize that it is not really a town at all. Like I told you, it's just a muddy pit with a whole bunch of stinky men and a bunch of tents. And unfortunately, there are no wagons and no horses to be found. So what the heck are you gonna do to get all of your stuff over there to Canada? Well, what you're going to have to do is carry it all yourself. One load at a time, back and forth. Back and forth. Most people can't carry 100 pounds with them, so you're taking like 50 or 60 pounds up to Canada and back, and up to Canada and back. So you're always coming back to Skagway. Seems wild, doesn't it? Now, once you start taking all of your stuff up that crazy mountain, you find yourself surrounded by mosquitoes and black flies, and they are no joke around here. So thick with mosquitoes and black flies, also smelling the carcasses of over 4,000 horses. The reason why there's no horse here when you got here is because all the stampeders before you had killed them by sending them on this trail that is made by the Native American people for a footpath they've been using for tens of thousands of years. It's not a horse path. So when you put horses on that hill, suddenly it turned into a mud pit and they would slide off into the canyon and ravine. So very smelly, very horrific, very uncomfortable trip. If you are able to make it with all of your stuff back and forth, you get there to Canada through the border and you are met with Lake Bennett, a gigantic lake that you have to somehow get across. So you realize quickly you have to build a boat. Anyone here have any experience building boats? Me either. And these people didn't either. They were mostly a bunch of city slickers from San Francisco and Seattle. They'd never really experienced the outdoors. And they're here at Lake Bennett, have to build their own boat. They have to log the trees, saw the boards, and build a boat. The historians say that this is where most partnerships broke up. Even brotherhoods, partners that have been working together for years, once they had to build a boat together, that was the ultimate test of the relationship. I think maybe before we get married, we should all have to build a boat from scratch, right? Well, if you did build that boat and you're just about to get out on the water, suddenly the short Alaskan summer, I told you about on the bus, turns into the long Alaskan winter, and that lake freezes solid almost overnight. So here you are with your boat, but you can't do anything with it. So for the next 4 months, you're gonna huddle up in a tent around a fire, hope that your fingers and toes don't freeze off, hope that you don't lose your mind in the monotony. And if you can get through that, no problem. In April, though, the ice melts. You put your boat out there if she's seaworthy, hopefully she is. 5,000 boats left the first day that she was unfrozen, the lake was unfrozen. They say that people could have walked across the lake on how many boats were shoved in there. Now, once you get out into the river, it's pretty easy to get to Dawson City from there, just a couple 100 miles down the Yukon River, until you get around the corner and find out you have 2 Class 5 whitewater rapids that you've got to get through. Class 5 is the highest class, the one that, that's the hardest thing for humans to get past. Anything beyond a Class 5 is almost impossible to survive. So, you go through the Five Fingers and the White Pass Rapids, then it's a fairly easy trip to Dawson City where you can start looking for your gold. Anyone want to go on that trip? I don't think so, me either. And again, this was the squeezing point. People had to come through Skagway. So Skagway became a really great little net for crime specifically. There were lots of gangsters taking advantage of stampeders. that were up here. So specifically Soapy Smith, he was our biggest gangster in town. He presented himself as a benefactor to society, but really he ran the whole town. He had all the cops on the take. Everyone was on the take with him and his gang of 300 men that would hustle you in all kinds of ways. I'll tell you about those later. But again, we're going to talk about the women mostly. Now that I've set the scene for you, there were also a lot of ladies here. Some of them intentionally, some of them got stuck here, but their stories are not often told. We often focus on what the men were up to. So today, let's focus on what the good time girls were doing. Let's head to our first brothel. What do you say? Yeah. Now we are crossing Broadway, so I'm really going to have to see you swing it, because people are going to see us now. Now this was part of the red light district in Skagway. Now originally in Skagway, prostitution was everywhere. It was kind of free for all, no problem. But as the town started to develop, they wanted to appear a little bit more respectable, of course. So they started passing ordinances on the working gals. And one of those was pushing them all into this area, the red light district. And I told you there's many types of gals that came here to work in the trade. There's also many types of working in the trade. We talked about this: streetwalkers, crib girls, and brothel girls. So the streetwalkers, they would go around town before the red light district. They would go around town and they would proposition you, say, "Hey daddy, you looking for a date?" Yes. And if you liked her, then you would pay her $1, and you would be lucky if you had maybe a bush or a rug to get your deed done on. So not very glamorous, right? And $1 then equals about $30 in today's money. So not the highest, but that's where you're at right now, just so you know, streetwalkers. Now, there were also the crib girls, and some of those girls, they operated inside little houses, little huts that you're going to see as we walk around town. I'll point them out. But they were basically just a tiny little shack with maybe a mattress or a hot plate to keep it warm. So not the most luxurious of accommodations, but for $3, you could spend a few minutes with a lady in a crib. And for $5, you could spend some time with a brothel gal there in the Skagway Inn, the Red Onion, or one of the other 4 places. Now that was $5. You would actually have a bed, a little more comfort, and a little more sophisticated type of lady. I'll talk to you a little bit more about the other ordinances that were passed, besides pushing everyone into this area as we get to another spot on the tour. But just imagine all of the prostitution shoved into this street, went from Broadway all the way down to Alaska Street. This was a very happening and hopping place with a whole bunch. Not many people are watching, except I'm watching, and I really appreciate it if you swing it a little bit for me. Ready? We're gonna look all the way to the right. Stick your butt out, come on. All the way to the left. Yeah, it's a good stretch. And now let's work it over to this corner. Woo, and watch out for the van. And most of us in Skagway are rather alcoholics, so we do hang out here a lot, especially in the winter when we have nothing else to do. We have a bowling alley in there, 2 lanes from the 50s, very fancy. But this is now the Elks Lodge. But in 1897, this is actually where the Red Onions sat. We moved the building. Skagway has a weird way of moving buildings around. We moved the building just a few years after the gold rush. They put a couple of logs underneath it, put 1 horse out on the front, and then we used my very favorite energy source, probably 50 or 60 big burly Alaskan men pushing it from behind. They pushed it all the way down to 2nd and Broadway. But here in the gold rush, you would have stepped into the Red Onion on this ground. And when you stepped in, you would have seen beautiful dancers whirling around the floor with all those stinky old miners. Those dancers were the dance hall girls. And the dance hall girls would charge $1 a dance to dance with her, and then her whole job was to get you to come to the bar and order some booze. Any liquor that was sold in her presence, she would get 25% of. So she'd want you to work up a thirst, get you a little tipsy so you'd want to do the dance, back and forth, back and forth. They could make pretty good money, and they didn't necessarily have to turn tricks. They had the luxury of deciding if they wanted to do that or not. Now, those were the dance hall girls, but my most favorite of all the girls in Gold Rush history were the actresses. They were the top, they were kind of like Hollywood movie stars. You know, they were the very top of the top. They got paid a salary of $150 a week. Who's good at math here? I'm terrible at it. Oh, good. So if I mess up, and don't tell anyone, and you don't broadcast that on YouTube if I can't do any math. But just know that money was worth 3 times more. So $150 a week then would have been, what's 150 times 3? 450. Thank you. $450 a week is pretty good for the girls. They also made 25% of any liquor that was sold in their presence, but they also got very clever and crafty on ways to make money. These were actresses, beautiful ladies. The first one I'm going to tell you about is Cad Wilson. She's quite famous here in Skagway. She wasn't necessarily very talented. She couldn't sing, she couldn't dance, and actually she really wasn't that attractive. What history says that the boys called her a pug in ruffles. Very rude, not very nice. I think she was pretty. I'll show you a picture of her in the brothel. I think she was quite striking. But it didn't really matter because she had a secret skill. She knew what made men hot. So she, first of all, in Victorian times, dresses were all the way down to the floor. You would never have seen a Victorian lady out on the streets wearing what I'm wearing now. They would have a neck collar. They would cover up all the way down to the wrist. They would have gloves on. Everything would be covered. So that showing a little bit of ankle back in the Victorian era was quite scandalous, and it made the boys get very excited, especially if it was in public. So Cad Wilson would climb up on the bar at the Red Onion, and she would start a little dance. Now she probably had on much more glamorous boots than I do. These are my boots made for walking. But she probably had on a heeled boot that showed her ankle. She'd pick up her dress, and she would get the boys so excited they would reach in their pockets and start fondling their nuggets. They're gold nuggets, that is. Now, they would then start to toss them her way, and she would catch them with her skirt. And as the gold started to fill up her skirt, it would go higher and higher, and she would be showing more and more until she got to the full Monty. You don't look very impressed with my Monty.
I was just picturing the, like the underwear that she had, like down to there.
Exactly these, precisely these. Not even a bit of rosy flesh, but this was enough to get the boys so excited. It was basically like a Playboy spread to show you panties at the bar. Now she had a whole skirt full of gold, and so she would just head over to the side of the stage, dump it out, and then start the whole damn thing over again. And there is word that she would do that 14 times a day. So smart cookie. She made good money. And my favorite story of hers, she would sit at the bar and talk to the boys, get them all frothed up, falling in love with her. She got one lunatic fan that said, "Dad, I love you so much. How about this? How about I buy a whole case of champagne in your presence?" Champagne was $20 a bottle then, so about $600 now? How much is that now? 60? Thank you. So it wasn't 30 times more. Yes, it was. Terrible math. Anyways, lots of money for these girls. 25% of the case of champagne. Now she, of course, said, "That sounds great." He said, "But wait, what we're going to do with that champagne is we're going to take it upstairs and we're going to fill the bathtub with champagne. And you are going to get in the bathtub and I'm going to watch you bathe." She said, "Oh man, a whole case of champagne, I get 25%. I can't say no to that deal." So up they went upstairs, filled the bathtub with the champagne. She began to disrobe when she had a change of heart. And she said, "Look, I'm not really that kind of girl. I don't think I could do this. But how about this? You're going to go downstairs, sit at the bar, order 2 shots of whiskey on my tab, and then you're just going to imagine what I'm doing up here." And he did. He totally fell for it. And he went downstairs, had 2 shots of whiskey, and imagined what she was doing upstairs. Now, she's not a con artist. She did it. She got in the tub. She got very effervescent, I'm sure. And then when she hopped out, she realized, oh, that's such a waste. So she bottled it all up again and brought it back downstairs and sold it again for another profit. Clever girl. But he was satisfied, and I think that's a good testament to sometimes what happens in our imagination is even better than what happens in real life, right? Now, Cad wasn't the only dance hall queen. There was also Klondike Kate. Klondike Kate was the most famous of the actresses. She was tall, she was redheaded, she had violet eyes, and they say she was so beautiful she could walk into a room and it would just go silent. She could also walk up to any man and look him in the eye, and he would then hand over all the money in his pockets. Do I need to tell the story again? Dang, I'm no Klondike Kate. Now, she did have a baton that had 200 yards of silk on it and went from red to orange to yellow. And she would lift it up into the ceiling at the Red Onion and do this dance that filled the ceiling with this fluffy chiffon, and it made the boys so excited. They said it looked like the ceiling was on fire. I think they also liked that she was shaking her chest as she moved it up in the air. But at the end of her dance, the flame dance, she would curl up into a ball, put the silk over her face, and hide her face. Anyone guess why she'd have to hide her face? To avoid her teeth getting chipped and her eyes getting blacked out by all of the gold that they would throw at her. Yes, she made so much money. And those 10 men that I told you about that left left Alaska with more money than they came, the big guys, they made a lot of money. They were called the Klondike Kings. One of them was Mr. John Nordstrom. You might know that last name. One was Mr. Pantages. But they were very, very wealthy, and they would come into Skagway and have a hoot and holler and good time, and they loved Klondike Kate so much they presented her with a belt that had giant gold nuggets on it, the size of your fist, that went all the way around her waist twice. Yes, I want to be one of those guys. Now, let's move on. We're going to go across. I told you I arrived here in October this last year, and it was kind of marooned here. And we were not really allowed to go out and meet people, so the only way for me to meet people in Skagway was to get on the magical Facebooks. And I was on Facebook when I, one afternoon, heard that there was a grizzly bear in town. That grizzly bear was walking through Molly Walsh Park. So of course I was curious about a grizzly bear downtown, wanted to know all about it. And as I was studying where that was, it was just a few blocks from my house, so I came down to check it out. And then I wondered, who was Molly Walsh? So I looked her up on the Wikipedias, and I started to learn things about her. Then I kind of went down a rabbit hole learning things. And I found out very quickly that she was a very impressive person. She was one of those dance hall girls that I told you about, the dollar a dance gals, but that was in Butte, Montana. And she came up here to Skagway to bring a touch of religion. She wanted to build a church, and she built the very first church in Skagway. I'm going to stand in front of this sign because it's terrible, and I'll explain it to you later, but I'm going to hide it from you for now. No.
I can't see that part. Don't worry about it.
You can't see it. All right. No, she came here building the first church, and she wasn't overly pious because she was actually very kind to the working girls and the prostitutes here. Many of them were dealing with illnesses. They were dealing with, abusive pimps or madams, that kind of thing. And they could always come to Molly and find a friend. And in fact, she rallied for the judge in town and for the church to allow the proper burial of prostitutes, because they tried to not have that happen, but she ended up making it happen so each of the working girls could have a proper burial if they passed on. Now, she was here doing her church thing and doing well, but just like in today's age, sometimes big businessmen don't really like little ladies with big ideas coming in and messing up their whole situation. I told you Soapy Smith, he was the guy that was running a gang in town, and he did not want such a lady here messing up all of his crime. So he cast her out of town. He really pushed her out of town, made it impossible for her to live here. So she went up the trail all the way almost to the Canadian border to a place called Log Cabin, and she built a tent camp. And that tent camp would help miners on their way up to Canada. They could stop and have a hot meal, have a place to stay, and if they couldn't afford it, she would still feed them. She very quickly became known as the Angel of White Pass. She was admired by all of the miners. Two in particular asked for her hand in marriage, Mike Bartlett and Jack Newman. They both wanted to marry her. She did the mistake that many of us girls do, and she ended up choosing the bad boy, Mike Bartlett. And she found out very quickly that he was more than just a little bit of a bad boy. He was a very abusive man, and he beat her regularly. He ended up having a child with her. He moved her down to Seattle. Hi, folks. Hi. He moved her down to Seattle, where she could no longer take the abuse, and she decided to leave him. In Victorian era, leaving your husband was very frowned upon. You were not allowed to do that, especially because she left him for his best friend, which was extremely scandalous. But it makes sense to me because he was a much more gentle person, and she needed some shelter for her and her son to be away from this maniacal, abusive man. Now, it wasn't very long that she was away because society shamed her so much. She ended up having to go back and reconsider with her husband and try to reunite. And it wasn't long after they did reunite that he ended up murdering her in a jealous rage. Now, this day that I came into the park and learned about Molly Walsh was on October 27th, which was the anniversary of her death. She was murdered on October 27th. So I felt very, very interested in her story. And especially after reading this terrible sign over here that blames, this murderous man on the evil of the drink, just making excuses that he'd had too much to drink. And also saying that she was, here lies drama, that she was a drama queen of some kind. So I hate this sign, and the mayor and I are working on getting a much better one that explains the story in detail. But we would have never known this story. There's many stories about women that you would never have known, except for the power of everlasting and true love. Because Jack Newman, the other man that had proposed to her, never stopped loving her. And he actually did very well for himself. He became a wealthy man. And before he died, he had this bust made down in the lower 48, and he sent it up on a boat with a note tacked to it to let everyone in Skagway know that this woman had existed. And the note said, "Alone without help, this courageous girl ran a grub tent near Log Cabin during the gold rush of 1897 and 1898. She fed and lodged the wildest gold-crazed men. Generations shall surely know this inspiring spirit. Murdered October 27th, 1902. So the only reason we know about her is because of him. And the only reason I know about her, I think that grizzly bear was telling me that we need to fix her legacy over here. Don't you think so? Haunted building. This is Mabel Ulry's house. Mabel Ulry came up here kind of like Molly Walsh, looking to bring a little religion to the town. So she would get a soapbox, a literal soapbox. She'd go down to the red light district, set the soapbox out in front, and start preaching fire and brimstone and hell and damnation for all of you fornicators. So she would get out there and yell about it. Obviously not very good for business. So a pimp or a madam might come out and slip Mabel $5 and say, "Mabel, please go save somebody else." So she'd take that money, pick up her soapbox, head on over to the next corner, and start it all again. And she did quite well for herself. There was a lot of prostitution for her to be yelling about, and she made quite a bit of money. And again, not a con artist. She really did believe these things, and she took that money and built this house. This house was a sort of a halfway house for ladies that were wanting to leave prostitution. She would nurse them through their tuberculosis or anything that they might have come down with. She would help them to get out of the trade or escape violence. She was also a really good matchmaker, and she would write letters to men down in the lower 48 that were lonely, maybe widowed, and she would connect them with some of the working girls here and pay for their ticket for them to go down and start a respectable life with a new husband, which I think is very sweet and lovely of her. Now, this is now owned by the National Parks, and they use it for seasonal housing for the trail crew workers. And I'm so glad that I had the opportunity. I heard the ghost story about this building when I got the script for this gig. And I thought it was very interesting, but I got to verify it because one of my friends is one of those trail crew workers. She just got here a couple of months ago, and she has the corner room right up there. Her name is Jack, and the way that her job works is she's here in town for 2 weeks, and then she goes out on the trail, working on trail crew for another 2 weeks, back and forth. It's called a hitch. So when she got to town, she set up her room the way that she wanted, as you do, and then she went out for 2 weeks to go work on the trail. She locked the door behind her. No one could have got in. She has the only key. And when she got back, all of the furniture that she had arranged for herself was back in its original location. And I had heard that story was what happens in this house, and it was really great to verify it with someone who was brand new and didn't even know that story. So apparently Mabel likes things a particular way in that house and has for years. There's a lot of antique furniture and some old photos in there that she will not allow to be moved. She's quite persnickety, and I like that about her. Over here, don't break it. And look, everyone's watching, so we really got to show them. TC, I'm watching you, sister. Touch of class, touch of sass. Here's what's gonna happen. Step on out. We'll stop traffic if we have to. And look all the way to the right. Yes, I'm watching you. All the way to the left. And work it. Work them streets. Shake it out. Yes, eat your heart out, Skagway. Watch us work. What's that? Coming this way. We're gonna, hey, Daddy, he says wanna ride. We're gonna wrap around here. I'm gonna take you up my back door. get a little champagne. Willing if you'd like. You didn't catch my name earlier, did you, Madam Ophelia Cockburn? Strong Scottish name.
Some folks don't be shy. We don't bite much. Yeah, very nice.
And pay us. Alright, everyone get a glass of bubbles or more water? We're gonna do a little toast. A champagne toast. Alright, we're gonna do it red onion style. So boys, I need you to get it up for me. Your glasses, of course. Ladies, we're gonna help them to keep it up. That's the red onion way. Cheers to the tenacious ladies of the past and the entrepreneurial women of today and all those handsome men, as long as they're willing to pay. Cheers, daughters. Yes. Welcome to the Red Onion. You are currently standing in the Bombay Room. The Bombay Room was added on to the building in the historic year of 2002. But the rest of the building on that side, the horniest wall in Alaska, is original from 1897. I'm going to take you up into the brothel, and the only rules there are, obviously it's a very tight space, so we're going to keep our protection on, very important in our line of work, of course. So we'll have masks on upstairs. Also, we ask that you take as many pictures and videos as you want. The more pictures and videos you take, the more likely you are to capture a ghost up there. We do have some ghosties, some spirits in the house. But please turn your flash off of your camera because we do have some light-sensitive artifacts up there. And speaking of lights, this is one of our oldest artifacts. This is the original gas lamp that sat out in front of the Red Onion Saloon, the red light that let all the boys know there was more than just booze and beer to be had here at the Red Onion. And the light is still turned on. And lucky for you, after that long walk, so am I. So I'm gonna bring you up these last 7 stairs to paradise. Once you finish your champagne or your water, you're welcome to just leave it here on the table. Those lovely madams will clean up after you. And you can join me upstairs in the brothel.
Do enjoy the climax of your afternoon, folks. Be careful, Adam, all right?
I'll tell you all about those dolls, what they mean. The creepy dolls. The creepy dolls. Welcome into the brothel, folks. Now, if you were in Skagway in 1897, you would have been surrounded by 15,000 dirty old miners. 15,000. And just 300 working girls. So, I don't know about you, but that math makes me a little tired just thinking about it, right? Now, you would have walked into the Red Onion knowing it was the finest of all the brothels, this most sophisticated. You would have stepped up to the bartender, ordered a shot of liquid courage, and then you would have looked behind the bartender and seen this. A row of 10 rag dolls. 10 dolls. Those dollies were made up to look just like the real life dolls that were up here in the brothel waiting. So you would pick your girl based on the eye color or hair color or the color of the dress that she may or may not be wearing. So you pick one of the gowns. The bartender would then take that doll and lay her on her back to let the rest of the room know that she was going to be busy for the next 15 minutes. Again, 15 minutes, right, TC? Maybe 12 minutes too long? Now, you would then be led up a staircase similar to the ones you just came up. A bouncer would have led you down this long, dark hallway. As you can see, many of the walls have been removed so that we can move around in here, but there were 10 little cribs up here. He would have taken you to that girl's crib, knocked on the door, and then the first rule of prostitution would have come into play. Streetwalkers, anyone know what that is? The first rule? No one? Yeah, no, not wash. That's very cute, very sweet. 1897 didn't care about washing so much.
Protection?
Protection is good. No. Money, honey. You gotta pay before you play. Yeah, so you knock on the door, you give the girl $5 in gold coins or gold nuggets. She'd take that money, stuff it somewhere safe, and then you'd have 15 minutes of fun. Bada bing, bada boom. Then the bouncer would have come and grabbed you by the arm and led you gently, or not so gently, down the back stairs here and kick you out down what I call the Walk of Fame. The bartender would hear your feet coming down the stairs. He would peek over and go, oh, there's old Joe, okay. So that means it's time for me to pick this doll back up and let everyone know she's back to work. But he had to wait for one sound before he could lift that girl back up. And that sound came from a hole. My hole. Take a peek. All right, now, each of the girls had a money hole in the floor of their crib. This is the last one that we have still in action here. But each of those holes were attached to copper tubing that went back through the ceiling, down behind the wall, and behind the bar into a safety deposit box. So once the girl was done turning her trick, she would take the money and just drop it on down the hole. And it would go clink, 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 clink all the way down, letting the bartender know that she was ready now for the next guy. So we'd get picked up. Now don't put any money down the hole now. That will not do you any good because we did unfortunately have to remove the copper tubing in the 70s. You know exactly where to stuff your money that you can stick it in my treasure chest. Don't put it down that hole, it would be such a waste. In 1979, we removed all that copper because the fire marshal said it was a fire hazard for the kitchen downstairs. So that was a huge loss to our history, but we're so glad we did it. Because when we did, we had to pop up all these floorboards. And underneath the floorboards, we found a treasure chest of items that the girls had left behind. Here is the treasure pile. Oh yeah, all of these items the girls had stashed for safekeeping. Over there you'll see items from what we were later. We were Brothel for 2 years. After that we were a radio station, pharmacy, and army barracks during World War II. But over here, these are the ladies' things. Long before the Kardashians, the ladies wanting a little junk in the trunk would just put this little bustle pad back there. And the most interesting item, I think, is this electric curling iron. What is it? You saw the curling iron. Yeah, so that is from 1897. We had electricity in Skagway a full year before New York City. Yeah, that shows how much money was happening and funneling through this town. And we still use that original electricity to light the brothel today. You can see it up on the ceiling. That's called tube and knob wiring. The end of this curling iron is unlike the new ones we have that have little prongs you stick in. These ones have a little knob at the end. Oh, excuse me, boys. A knob. Never say little knob in the presence of gentlemen. This knob, the girls would have to hop up on their bed and unscrew the light bulb, screw in the curling iron, curl their hair in the dark, unscrew the curling iron, screw in the light. Lots of screwing going on. You get the idea. But that let us know that these girls were very fancy. They had the cutting edge technology. And the reason they were fancy is because of their Madam Diamond Lil. She's the lady that takes care of all the girls. She would walk around town looking for the most beautiful ladies. And she would come up to them and say, oh, hello, darling. What's your name?
Patsy.
Oh, hi, Patsy. Ooh, I love that name. You're so beautiful, and you should come work for me. And if you do, I will put you in the most beautiful gowns. I will feed you 3 meals a day, and I'll make sure that you're protected with big security guards. And just because you're extra fancy, I'm going to let you pick out your very own French silk wallpaper. You can redecorate your little room with whatever design you'd like. Which brings me to the wallpaper room. Let's go in and see. Hold on, man. As you can see, it's called the wallpaper room because of all the wallpaper that we were able to uncover during Reconstruction. Each of these wallpapers was chosen by one of the working girls here over 100 years ago. So they're kind of like postcards from the horrors of yore. Now each of the girls picked their favorite pattern, and in one of the crib rooms we found 18 layers of wallpaper. That shows you how much turnover was happening. In just 2 years, 18 girls had worked in that one crib. Now that's because of our rough and tumble history and our violent past. And our violent past leads to our haunted present. Sometimes the girls would not make it back to their room, or these rooms would be vacant overnight. And we know many of our ghosts. There's lots of ghosts up in this house. But the one ghost that everyone that works at the Red Onion has had an experience with, her name is Lydia. She's very present here. We've been visited by Ghost Hunters, the TV show, lots of podcasts following ghosts, and many supernatural investigators. They all agree that this corner here is the most haunted in the house. Now we experience Lydia all over the place here, but this specific corner is where she worked. We know because historians have uncovered her letters, and many mediums have spoken to her, and there's been seances here where she lets people know what had happened. Before Reconstruction, this room was wallpapered with just one layer of wallpaper. She worked here all 2 years in this corner. She was writing letters and sending money to her lover up in Dawson City, and sending him money to support him while he looked for gold. He said that as soon as he hit his jackpot and found his gold, he would come back and marry her. Well, he never found gold. Instead, he found another wife, or another woman, and married her in Dawson City. And when Lydia got word that that had happened, she was bereft and she took her own life here. She actually hanged herself in this corner. So she is very present around here. She's really nice to the ladies. You might feel your hair get caressed, a little tickle on your neck. You might smell her perfume as well. The ghosts in Skagway seem to like their perfume, but she smells like fresh cut lilacs. Boys, she's not so nice to. You might feel a little kick in the shin, maybe even a little shove on your way down the stairs, so hold tight to the railing. But she's more mischievous than she is violent, and I can't blame her for not liking the boys after that situation. Over here, you're going to see the finest item. It is the prettiest item that we found, the fanciest and most expensive, of course. It looks like an evening gown that you would wear out, but it is not. In fact, when you take a closer look, it is mesh and completely transparent, except for the sequins that are on it. It is an early form of very scanty lingerie. So that also has a little trick string on the back of it. If you pull the string, it will undo the sleeves and the back of the dress, and the dress will fall to your feet. It's 10 pounds, this dress. That's why it's laying on its back. That's because the sequins are copper dipped in sterling silver and then hand pressed onto it. It is a gorgeous piece. We do not know who it belonged to. We assumed it belonged to our Madame Diamond Lil because she's the fancy lady, right? But we know it didn't belong to her because she was 6 feet tall and 200 pounds, which was pretty extraordinary in 1898 to have such anyone, even a man, be that big. But she was very big, bigger than life, and extraordinary in another way. She would take on clients. Usually madams just have their girls turn tricks, but she would too, for $100 an hour or $1,000 a night. And this I do know the math on. $1,000 a night in today's money is $29,840. Wow. So yes, so she made quite the cash. She must have been a luxurious lay. Now she required 3 items of paperwork before she would spend the night with you. And those were a clean bill of health from your doctor, a letter of recommendation, and most importantly, she wanted to see your most recent bank statement, which I think is good rules for dating in general. So I'll let you look at this beautiful dress, and then I'm going to put you through a crib set up just like they were back in the day. You'll see the original bed from 1897. That bed is called a 3/4 twin, very tiny, the same size as the back seat of a car. But you can get things done in tight spaces, right? So you'll see what that looks like set up, and then meet me in the Madam Suite when you're done laying your eyes on those things, and I will let you know what happened to Madame Diamond Hill. No, it's all original. Yes. All of this wallpaper is from 1897. You can see it's still just kind of hanging in there. Oh, there is some in that corner because of water damage in that little room. That's a little more modern. I think it was like 1980s that they put it there. But the rest of this is all original. As you can see, quite a bit more luxurious in here. The madam had her own fireplace. Right over here, you can see where it once was. The rest of the girls just had to rely on the friction that they were creating in the room. Now, Madame Diamond Lil made so much money. So in Skagway, it cost $6 a day to live here. If you were a woman in a respectable position, like a seamstress or a cook, you could only hope to earn $3 a day. So it was nearly impossible for a woman on her own to live here unless she turned to the trade. And some of them did it to survive, others ended up thriving, and no one thrived more than Madame Diamond Lil. When she left Alaska, she had diamonds on all of her fingers, both of her thumbs, on her garters, in her ears, just dripping in diamonds. Everywhere she went in Skagway, they said, lit up the room like a crystal chandelier. Now, not only did she get rich, but she got famous. All of the newspapers wanted to talk about her and her hijinks all the time. So at the height of her fame and her fortune, she made the worst mistake of prostitution. Anyone here know that?
Falling in love with a John.
Bingo! Yes, girl, falling in love with a John. That's the worst thing that you can do for your business, right? Well, she fell in love with quite the John. His name was Big Joe Hopkins, and he came from Seattle. He was charming, he was handsome, and he was filthy rich. And he said, Diamond Lil, hang up your whoring ways. Let's go down to Seattle and start a more respectable life. We'll be a power couple down there. What do you say? Well, he was irresistible. So she left all of her empire behind and went to go live a more respectable and frankly boring life down in Seattle. And when she got there, she found out that he was not in fact rich. He was a con artist, a gambler, and a drunk. And he gambled all of her money away within just 3 years. Devastating. Well, one of the Klondike news reporters was going through Seattle when he spotted her once, which is kind of hard to miss, but she was scrubbing the floor at a fancy hotel. And he said, "Did such a great lady fall so low? Please give us a quote for the paper. Your readers want to know what happened."